Hey there, how are you holding up today? Feeling okay? Or maybe a little worn out from carrying too much on your shoulders? If that hits home, trust me, are not alone. I'm hoping you can take a moment, just a few minutes, to sit back, breathe, and listen to a story with me. Because sometimes, we don't even realize we've hit our limit until someone makes us feel guilty, just for not being able to do one more thing. Today, I want to share a story about a wife tired, stretched thin, and craving a sliver of fairness. She's been holding it together for her husband and kids, day after day, pouring herself into keeping everyone else afloat. But then, something small happens, a tiny spark that sets off all the feelings she's been bottling up. In a moment of frustration, she says one simple thing, "Clean it up yourself," and the response she gets, "You're a terrible wife, ouch." So, who's in the right here? Who's in the wrong? I'm curious to know what you think. Stick with me until the end to get the whole picture, because this story's got more layers than it seems. Laura stood in the kitchen of their small Minnesota home, the morning light filtering through the blinds in thin, dusty stripes. Her hands moved on autopilot, spinning oatmeal into bowls for her two kids, Ellie, 4, and Sam, 2. The air smelled of cinnamon and burnt toast, and the faint, lingering tang of disinfectant clung to her fingers. She hadn't slept more than a few hours in days, not since Mike got sick 5 days ago. It started with him doubled over in pain, vomiting, diarrhea hitting him like a freight train. They thought it was a stomach bug at first, something vicious but quick. Later, they wondered if it was food poisoning from that sketchy leftovers container he'd eaten at work. Either way, it didn't matter. The result was the same. Mike was out of commission, and Laura was holding down the fort alone. She didn't mind at first. Mike was her husband, her partner, the guy who could still make her laugh after a decade together. She loved him, and when he was hurting, she wanted to help. So she jumped in cooking bland soups he could keep down, washing endless loads of laundry, changing sweat-soaked sheets, scrubbing the bathroom after every bout of sickness. She kept Ellie and Sam fed, bathed, and entertained, reading Goodnight Moon 3 times a night to get them to sleep, all while checking on Mike, bringing him water, ginger ale, anything to ease the misery. She didn't complain, not once. But God, she was tired. The kind of tired that sank into your bones, that made your eyes burn and your patience fray like an old rope. It wasn't one big thing that got to her. It was the little stuff, piling up quietly. Mike spent most of his days on the living room sofa, a trash can parked next to him, Laura's idea, so he wouldn't have to sprint to the bathroom every time his stomach turned. But sometimes, he didn't make it to the can. She'd hear the telltale sound, the awful splatter, and her heart would sink. She'd grab a rag, a bucket, the spray bottle of cleaner, and get to work, scrubbing the floor, wiping down the sofa, tossing yet another pillowcase in the wash. She'd light a candle or spritz air freshener to mask the smell, but it never really went away. No one noticed her doing it. No one said thank you. It was just expected. By Friday morning, Laura was running on fumes. She was in the kitchen, trying to keep Ellie from flinging oatmeal at Sam, who was smearing banana on the high care tray. The kids were loud, the kind of chaotic energy only toddlers can muster at 7 a.m. Laura's head throbbed, and she hadn't had time to make coffee. Across the room, Mike was on the sofa, looking pale but better than he had all week. He was nibbling on a piece of dry toast, his first real food in days. Laura felt a flicker of relief was improving. Maybe this nightmare was almost over. Then she heard it, the choking, gurgling sound that had become way too familiar. Her stomach dropped. "Mike," she called, her voice sharp over the kids' chatter. "Use the trash can, please, or get to the toilet." She didn't mean to sound harsh, but she was stretched so thin, her nerves raw from days of cleaning up after him. Mike didn't respond. A second later, the sound came again, louder, wetter. Then the smell hit her, sour and unmistakable. She turned just in time to see Mike lean forward, vomiting onto the floor. It splattered across the rug, pooled on the hardwood, and, God help her, sprayed onto the sofa. The toast he'd been eating lay in chunks amid the mess, and Laura's heart sank. She stood frozen, a spoon in one hand, Ellie tugging at her sleeve, Sam starting to wail. 5 days of this. 5 days of holding it together. And now this. She didn't say anything. She couldn't. Her throat was tight, her eyes stinging with frustration and exhaustion. Laura set the spoon down, grabbed a rag from the sink, and walked toward the mess. Another day, another cleanup. But inside, something was starting to crack. Laura stood in the living room, rag in hand, staring at the mess on the floor. The sour smell of vomit hung in the air, mixing with the faint cinnamon from the kids' breakfast. Ellie was still chattering in the kitchen, Sam banging a spoon against his high chair. Laura's head pounded, her body heavy with exhaustion. 5 days of caring for Mike, the kids, the house Alona had left her feeling like a stretched rubber band, ready to snap. And now this. Vomit on the rug, the hardwood, the sofa. She hadn't even had a chance to process it when she heard Mike's slow footsteps behind her. He shuffled into the kitchen, his face pale and drawn, hair sticking to his forehead. He looked like he'd been through a war, which, in a way, he had. But he didn't look at Laura, didn't acknowledge the mess or her standing there, frozen. He just leaned against the counter, his voice low and tired. "I'm gonna go lie down upstairs," he said. A pause. Then, casual as anything, "Can you clean that up for me?" No sorry. No glance to see the strain on her face. Just a quiet assumption, like it was her job. Like the past 5 days of her scrubbing, cooking, and soothing hadn't been enough. Laura's grip tightened on the rag. Something inside her, some thin, fraying thread of patience snapped. She turned to face him, her voice steady but sharp. "No," she said. "I'm sorry, Mike. But no, you could have used the trash can. I've been cleaning up after you all week. Today you need to handle it yourself." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Mike froze, his hands still on the counter. For a moment, neither of them moved. Laura's heart raced. Hadn't meant to sound so harsh, but she was done. Done being the one who always picked up the pieces, who swallowed her exhaustion to keep everyone else afloat. She waited for him to say something, anything, an apology, maybe, or even an acknowledgement that she was human, too. But Mike just stood there, his jaw tight. After a long, silent second, he turned and walked out of the kitchen, his footsteps heavy on the stairs. The door to their bedroom clicked shut, and that was it. No words, no glance back, just silence. The rest of the day was a blur. Laura went through the motions, wiping down the high chair, settling the kids for a nap, scrubbing the living room floor herself because she couldn't stand the smell lingering. But Mike's silence followed her, heavy and cold. He didn't speak to her directly, not once. Instead, he let his words slip out in sharp, pointed jabs, loud enough for her to hear as he moved through the house. A good wife wouldn't punish her husband for being sick, he muttered as he passed her in the hallway, grabbing a glass of water. Later, as she folded laundry in the living room, he was back on the sofa, scrolling on his phone. "Real love means helping even when I don't deserve it," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm, not even looking up. And then, the one that cut deepest, tossed out as she was tucking Ellie into bed. "Guess I should apologize for getting sick." Huh? Each comment landed like a stone, piling up in her chest. Laura felt her throat tighten, her eyes burning with tears she refused to let fall. She wasn't just hurt, she was angry, confused, and drowning in guilt. Had she been too harsh? Was she wrong to draw a line? For 5 days, she'd poured everything into caring for him, for their kids, for their home. She'd cleaned up his messes, held him when he was too weak to sit up, stayed awake through the night to make sure he was okay. And now, because she'd said no to one more task, she was the villain. A terrible wife. As she sat on the edge of the couch that evening, the house finally quiet, Laura's mind churned. Was she heartless for refusing to clean up one more time? Or was she just trying to survive, to carve out some tiny space for herself in a week that had demanded everything? She thought about Mike upstairs, probably still stewing, convinced he was the victim. She thought about the kids, oblivious to the tension, but sensing it in the way kids always do. and she thought about herself, her aching body, her frayed nerves, the part of her that just wanted to be seen, not as a wife or a mom or a nurse, but as a person who was breaking under the weight. Laura hugged her knees to her chest, staring at the now clean rug. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew one thing. That one sentence, "No, you need to handle it yourself," had changed something. Maybe it was the start of a bigger fight. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the start of something better. Laura sat at the kitchen table, the house quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. The kids were asleep, Mike was upstairs, and the living room rug was finally clean scrubbed by her hands. As always, her laptop glowed in the dim light, the cursor blinking in an empty text box on an anonymous online forum she'd stumbled across months ago. It was a place where people vented, shared, and sometimes found clarity in the chaos of their lives. She'd never posted before, but tonight, with her chest tight and her thoughts spiraling, she needed to let it out. She needed to know if she was wrong. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, then started typing. She poured it all out: 5 days of caring for Mike, the endless cleaning, the kids, the exhaustion, the vomit on the rug, her refusal to clean it, and Mike's cutting words: a good wife wouldn't punish her husband for being sick. She wrote about the guilt gnawing at her, the fear that she'd abandoned him when he needed her most, but also the angered feeling that she'd been reduced to a maid, not a partner. Was I wrong? She typed at the end. Did I make him feel alone? Or was I just standing up for myself? I don't know anymore. She hit post and closed the laptop, her heart pounding. It felt reckless, exposing her raw thoughts to strangers. But she couldn't talk to her friends, not yet they'd take her side too quickly, or worse, judge her for airing her marriage's cracks. The forum felt safer, a void where she could scream and maybe, just maybe, be heard. By morning, her post had blown up. Hundreds of replies, a flood of voices from people she'd never meet. Laura scrolled through them, her coffee growing cold. Women, men, parents, singles, they all had something to say. "You're not wrong," wrote one user. "A mother of 3? You're human, and you've been carrying way too much. He needs to step up." Another, a guy in his 30s, added, "I've been the sick one before, and yeah, it sucks, but your husband's guilt-tripping you. That's not fair." A third comment cut deeper. "He's using his illness to dodge responsibility. My ex did the same. Don't let him make you the bad guy." Laura read on, her eyes stinging. Some shared their own stories: wives who'd burned out, husbands who'd learned to listen, partners who never did. Others were blunt. "He's manipulating you." Those comments about a good wife are straight out of the emotional abuse playbook. The words felt harsh, but they rang true. Mike's jabs had felt like knives, each one twisting her guilt tighter. Yet a small part of her resisted. Mike wasn't a monster. He was sick, hurting, wasn't he? That evening, after dinner, Laura made a decision. She pulled up the forum on her phone and handed it to Mike. He was on the couch, looking better, but still pale, flipping through TV channels. "Read this," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "I posted about what happened. I want you to see what people think." Mike raised an eyebrow, his lips curling in a skeptical smirk. "You put our business online." "Really?" Laura. But he took the phone, scrolling slowly. She watched his face, the way his smirk faded, his brow furrowing. He read for a long time, longer than she expected. The comments were unrelenting strings, calling out his words, his assumptions, his failure to see her. "I said that," he muttered once, almost to himself, when he reached a comment quoting his good wife line. Laura stayed silent, letting the words sink in. When he finally set the phone down, he didn't speak. His jaw was tight, his eyes fixed on the floor. Laura braced herself for anger, for another sarcastic jab, but none came. Instead, Mike stood, walked to the kitchen, and grabbed a rag. She watched, stunned, as he went to the living room, knelt by the rug, and started scrubbing a spot she'd missed. It was the first time he'd cleaned up after himself all week. When he finished, he came back to the couch and sat beside her. "Thanks," he said, his voice low, "for everything you've been doing." It wasn't an apology, not exactly, but it was something. A crack in the wall between them. Laura nodded, her throat tight. There was no big, cinematic hug. No tearful reconciliation. The hurt was still there, the weight of the week still heavy. But that small act, Mike cleaning, Mike saying thank you, felt like a step. Not a fix, but a start. For today, for Laura, it was enough. She glanced at the phone, the form still open, and felt a quiet gratitude for those strangers. They didn't know her, but they'd seen her, and maybe, just maybe, that had helped Mike start to see her too.